So the difference between the two, right? Skills, what are they? Behavioural instructions, like we discussed, response styles and modifications, auto detection patterns, and then design system enforcers. Sub agents, what are these? Well, these are complex automation systems, multi-tool workflows, specialised processors. MCPs, they're external services that basically are connections, for a better word of it, I'm just being very broad. It connects one AI to another AI. This was developed by Claude back in November last year. If anyone is old enough to remember, years and years ago in a recording studio, if you understand a bit about music, in order to link the drum machines and the computers and synthesizers together, they had something that was called MIDI, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. So today, if we look at about the way we've got pretty much universal connection and chargers for mobile devices, the ecosystem at the moment is MCPs. Now, MCPs, there is a thing where they're a bit sloppy. There are other risks involved if you haven't got security put into place. What you need to understand is that having the skills and the MCPs and having a good handle on safety and security, these are going to make a massive difference, right? And what's happened now, MCPs are now becoming much more useful because you can control the efficiency through skills. So let's look at some of these example skills: repetitive tasks, brand consistency, token optimization, auto generation workflows. With sub agents, multi-step operations, data transformation, system integration, and advanced automation. MCPs, external data needs, service integration, real-time updates, and cross-platform sync. So an example would be, I've got the full taxonomy database of the whole catalog structure. And so I'm able to marry all those things and their components together because I have them in a structured database in Supabase. And I can connect to Supabase using the Supabase MCP. So that gives you an example there. With skills, characteristics, always active in the background, auto detect and apply, persistent across sessions, then sub-agents, manually invoked, full code-based access, state management and complex decision trees. And then on the characteristics of MCPs, real-time data, external services, persistent connections, and a bi-directional sync. So let's look at something in terms of the problems we have to resolve with Claude. And the context window is the amount of tokens that get used. So in here, Claude response might take 800 tokens. And then the follow-up, that's another 600. And then you start to burn through your context window availability of the conversation. And so once you start to break all of these down, if these are running in the background and they are structured and efficient, that means that you're going to get an increase in capacity through efficiency. So if we were to look at skills after maximum efficiency, user request, upload CSV, skill activates, auto detect, 0 questions. Then execute, 150 tokens done, context saved, 8% reduction, so you can keep working. The thing I'm trying to say there is that I was always trying to manage that window. It became impossible, and then I moved to Claude Code. Now I can move back to the desktop because it's a lot easier to work. Now we have a bit more room to do more things than a handful of requests, especially when you're using a persistent memory. You've got a design system, you've got things that are set up that eat up a lot of your tokens at the very beginning of the conversation. Again, when I say the words app, I'm using the apps words very, very lightly. So I call these single feature snacks. You can build them pretty quickly. If you think what pretty quickly is, 2 or 3 days is pretty quick, an 8-hour day is pretty quick. But now we've got to the stage where you can build almost the same thing within reason, outside of writing additional logic because you've got the skills, in 10 to 15 minutes. So I installed the skill here, right? This skill is to optimize the MCPs. The problem with MCPs, they're hungry on tokens. So we run through some tests and stuff here, right? And then in this one here, How about go to Amazon.com and do an analysis of this product detail page, because that tends to really eat up a lot of tokens and then maxes out the conversation. So we did it on this here, which I'll show you in a minute. So it then devises the strategy and it goes through, it navigates with the URL. You can see here, okay, it ran Playwright. Anyone who listens to the podcast that does use Playwright knows exactly what I mean when they see this, how impressive it is to be able to do this in Claude Desktop without it maxing on the conversation. So the evidence skill worked because this was just a quick test. So without this skill, the Amazon PDP snapshot would have returned a massive response, consumed a load of tokens. Then I'm like, okay, well, if you've captured all this information, where is it? Let's have a little look. So what have you captured? You mentioned bullet points above, but have you captured an analysis and then put in the artifact window as a markdown file with specific information, right? So here it's gone through, it's done this, and then, okay, as you can see, so there is quite a bit of information here, okay? Product intelligence, market intelligence, optimization intelligence, key findings. But in the same conversation, I was able to go and capture a load of information from the PDP and then generate that, which took about 10 minutes. Let me go to comment and we're going to do Claude because I'll show you where to drop the skills into. So I am on the max plan, but you don't have to be on that. I think I'll pay £200 or £180. I'm not sure exactly. I'm using 15%. I've got a spending cap, but actually I use another tool for when I'm running Claude Code. You want to use the code file creation tool, right? Because what we're doing here is, and you can use this for presentations, but this is helpful because it writes script. It's kind of helps shape some of the logic and the structure from the information that it is capturing already. And then what you do is you drop in your skills. So you can see, look, auto dash build, generation client. So I've did this so it's got no curve branding, which I've showed you the black and white ones there. And then as we can see here, this one prevents massive MCP responses for WordPress, Playwright, Notion, and other MCPs. So for instance, WordPress will always going to be heavy. Imagine if like the podcast has got maybe 100 and some change in terms of pages. If there's no control over that, it's going to just do a full-on search. You can do slides. I'll set this up for Cheryl, my wife, and then share that with her. Dashboard auto generation. This is the one that I use for my design system. I've also got the design system outside the auto dashboard generation. Then you got the concise execution mode. So this is optimizing responses. These come with Claude, so you can test these. You can do your brand guidelines. I've not used any of their standard ones. They do have a skill creator, but I actually built a skill agent, which is more sophisticated. The skill agent that I built will allow me to take SO and then turn them into skill MD files. And because I can turn them into skill MD files, we'll be able to do and use the SOPs, the work to be done, depending on what it is, by Claude, because it can use the MCPs. So where you'd normally give VAs the SOPs to follow, some of the SOPs are going to be in a way that it can be automated. Now, another thing on top of that, I'm converting some of my agents with the skills maker in Claude Code, and then some of those will be able to be turned into skills we'll be able to use in Claude Desktop.